Hello and welcome to my laboratory where safety is number 10 priority. Right guys, it's pouring with rain outside. It's going to be all day, so I decided I'm going to spend the day in the workshop and I'm going to put a new handle on this Mora knife. So, Mora knives are brilliant, they make excellent blades, but their handles are not very pretty. So they're cheap, cheerful, and if you put a nice handle on it you end up with a really good blade with a really nice handle, and it's just a great all-round package and you save yourself a ton of money. So if you want to see how I do it, stay tuned. Right folks, first step is to cut the handle off. There we go. Right, so there you can actually see the full insides of a Mora knife. You can see it's actually really sturdy. They do make strong handles. I guess that's why they don't break. But still can't fight a hacksaw. There we go. So now I've got a nice tang ready for action. Yeah, so I'm just going to turn this raggedy spine that's just been kind of roughly cut into a nice 90-degree edge for scraping ferro rods with. It also just makes the knife look better. Right, so now is when I'll just give the blade a little rub down with some Scotch-Brite. Just clean off any sort of rust or anything like that. Just because it's a carbon blade. Make sure it's definitely dry, and then I'm going to wrap it up, which is normal insulation. Oh, sorry. Normal masking tape. So that I don't cut myself. There we go. Right, so next step is to fit the bolster. I'm using a sheet of aluminium, well, a little block of aluminium. I find you gotta use a soft metal for this, because if you use something like stainless steel, yeah, it'll be really nice and strong, but like what I tend to do is just leave the outside as a sort of random shape like that and sand it down with the wood, and that way the wood and the bolster all just fit perfectly, everything's nice. So if you've got a really hard metal, when you're sanding it down it's really hard to keep it cool. It tends to overheat, whereas aluminium sands down pretty much just as fast as the wood. Okay, now to get this bolster kind of nice looking, I've developed this crazy contraption. I use it for sharpening my knives and things, but see, just for cleaning up all the sort of roughness of it, I find this works really good, but you got to be quite careful with it because it can send things flying. So that was just a bit of 400 grit. Okay, for this step we're just going to use a punch and a hammer. Pretty simple stuff. There we go. Alright, next step is to just clean up in here. So you can use a little tiny file, but the file I normally use is actually too small or too big for this. So I'm using a little junior hacksaw blade. Just snap it in half and away you go. Might get back to you once I'm more progressed here. This is going to take a while. Right, so that's the bolster all fitted. I find personally I like to have a little bit of play in it, as I do with all the pieces of wood that I glue on, because I find like I'm not a master woodworker. I don't measure everything spot on, and if you're cutting lots of different layers of wood and everything's wedging on, it's very easy to get little sort of irregularities, and you'll end up with like glue gaps between your pieces of wood, which just make it look less nice. So I find a little bit of play in everything like that means that when you clamp it down at the end, everything all fits together perfectly. Next job's get some wood organised here. I'm going to make it out of a little bit of walnut. Some olive wood is the main sort of bulk of the handle, and I've got these two little pieces that I made, and just to show you how I make these, it's really handy to glue these up before, like the night before or whatever, just with standard wood glue. And all you do is you just get little thin slices and you just glue them all together with wood glue and then clamp them in a vise and just leave them to dry. It saves you a lot of epoxy resin, because epoxy resin is expensive stuff, wood glue is cheap as chips. So you make these little things up, they're super strong, they're a lot easier to work with than having little thin pieces, you know, if you're trying to drill holes for the tang to fit through. So it also separates your handle into, like, you know, 4 or 5 bits instead of 10, 15 bits. So you've got a lot more time to work with the glue, because it's only 5-minute epoxy, so you've got literally 5 minutes to get the handle all glued up. And if you're messing about with little individual thin pieces, you run out of time. Yeah, if you do it this way, you've got a lot more time. And I'm going to go with olive wood, like a little piece of olive wood. Then one of these, which is ebony, purple heart, ash, purple heart, and then ebony. Then a little bit of walnut. Then same again. And then the olive wood at the back. So yeah, let me chop it up and I'll show you. Okay, so I'll put those offcuts away. Now the most important thing is, see when you cut this, right, you want to keep everything all the same so that the grain lines up, because there's nothing worse than putting a handle together like this and you end up flipping it around like that and the grain doesn't line up as it goes through the handle. So what I'm going to do now is, this is actually going to be the top. I'm going to mark it. You know what? These pens are rubbish. There we go, there we got a proper pen now. And obviously for drilling, I'm not going to be drilling the hole right in the centre of these, I'm going to be drilling it a little bit high, because the top of the knife is always closer to the tang. So I need to mark all these now as well. So I'll just get these 2 blocks. I don't really need to put an arrow on these little thin bits, but as long as they're marked purple, then I know which way around they go. Done. Right, first job. Need to get this one fitted. So all I do, you don't need to be super accurate with this, like some people really make them fit extra good, but I find if you use good enough epoxy, I've never had a handle break. So some people might hate me for that, but it's the simple way of doing it, and it saves you a whole bunch of measuring. Okay. Simple as that. You know what? I'm just looking at this and I'm like, that tang is awful short. I think I'm going to weld another bit onto that tang. I don't think it's big enough. Now, obviously if I was making a simpler handle with less pieces on it, that wouldn't be a factor. You know, because, well, if the last piece was like that, that would be fine. But I'm going complicated here. Yeah, do you know what's throwing me off? A lot of the time I'll make handles with this, and look, that's a normal tang. I guess Mora does cut a few corners. So if you want a really strong knife, either make it out of less pieces, so the last piece has got a good sort of that much in the tang, or if you got access to a welder, just weld another bit on. Get in there. That one, that one. There we go, now we got a much better piece to work with. So what I do then, make sure it's all nice and tight. I'll mark the end. I'll draw up one side. Just like that. Across. And mark the center. Like, this is obviously way wider than it needs to be, so I can cut down a whole bunch of that, but it's nice to have spare. I hope that rain isn't too big of noise in the background, but you know what you do? You just take your drill and you make sure it can't. See how that it's going to bottom out pretty much exactly how deep I want it. You could use a pillar drill. I don't have a pillar drill, so I just kind of eyeball it. That's why I've got a lot of spare stuff to work with. Man, that rain! That's mental! Start from the bottom. When it gets to this stage, you can actually take it out, and that way it empties itself out easier. There we go. Let's see if it fits. Moment of truth. Ta-da! So now we just need to glue that all up, and we'll be sorted. Now, I've tried a whole bunch of different glues, cheap glues, stuff like that. I find Araldite or Gorilla Glue 5-minute epoxy works really good. Every time I put a handle on with them, it's set hard, it's been super strong, and it's never come off until I've decided to chip it off with a hammer or something like that to put a new handle on. So yeah, you really can't go wrong with this stuff. I love it. So I don't think there's quite enough here to do the full handle. Well, it's definitely not, and I don't want to mix it with this, so I'm just going to start off with a nice fresh one. It might seem like a good idea to have it all in one pile, but actually the more you spread it out, the longer it takes to set. Epoxy's weird like that. If it's in a big sort of pile, it'll actually set faster. Anyway, time to get all glue all over my fingers. Just paste that all the way around. Multitasking here. This is actually my first time filming this, so it's proving to be quite a high pressure situation. There we go. Right, so that goes on there. Usually just with the bolster, I tend to shove it in the wee gaps just to make sure it's good. This is when you're really happy that you've marked everything, because you start trying to figure out which way is up and down. Now you're kind of done for. Shove it all in there. Slide it on. Fill the hole. This is also really important to make sure you fill all the gaps as you go. Don't just trust that the air will get squished out. Again, checking every single piece to make sure it's going on the right way around. It's the easiest mistake to make. That piece on. That one's pretty much full already. Happy days. And then the last piece, I just shove a whole bunch of glue in here and hope for the best. Oh, something I forgot to mention, by the way. See this paint, or this marker pen that I've used? It's not permanent marker. They're called Posca pens, and it's basically like paint. It doesn't soak into the wood. So if you use a permanent marker, it'll actually soak in a good mil into the wood, and that can be pretty bad, like especially when you're trying to sand it out, whereas this stuff, it's literally just on the surface, so I don't need to really worry about it. Go get this absolutely loaded with glue. I usually do that, and then you scrape it all back up to the top, because what that's doing is that's shoving the glue right down inside it, and you hear it popping as it forces the air out. Shove a bit more glue in there. I think we're good to go. Now, this is when I usually check to make sure that all the pieces of wood are sort of in line with the blade, because they can rotate a little bit. So you just get them nice and flat, straight, all looking good. And then you just put pressure on it and you just hold it. Bit of pressure. You can see all the purple lines are all on the right side, and that's the biggest thing to concentrate on when you're gluing, because, well, like I say, you get one piece the wrong way around, you can see it when you finish it, the grain doesn't line up, or your hole's in the wrong place and you can't fit your handle on the way you want it to. Alright, and the last step, get something heavy. If you've got a big F-clamp or something like that, you could put that on it. But I tend to just put that on there. It's a big lump of steel. And that just clamps it all down nicely. So, can you still see me? There we go. But yeah, so that just puts nice pressure on it. Keeps everything all stuck together while it's curing. And you leave it for about 2 hours, something like that. And then you can come back and shape the handle. Well, when you've got 2 hours to kill, I wouldn't recommend it, but why not juggle hammers? There we go. Right, so if you haven't hit the thumbs up button, come on, this deserves a thumbs up, doesn't it? Hey! Alright, so that has been, it's actually been about 2.5 hours, and see how that bit of glue just snaps off? Means we're ready to rock. I'll just mark, see I got the mark there for when the tang ends, so I mark that on the top. So I know where that is. I also mark on the back. So what you could do is you could take the old handle if that's what you're modelling it on, and you can mark it out and, you know, go by that. I tend to just draw it freehand. So there's no point in marking the sides because we're going to cut that off. So we've got the end of our tang marked there, and we've got it marked at the back, the height. So as soon as we cut these sides down, then I'm going to mark that back on the side again. So I just cut that off, but you definitely don't want the saw to go into the bolster there. That would be bad for your blade. Now all we do is just mark out the shape there, round it off, job's a good one. Remember to keep that bit. So now basically just checking that. This is a slightly generous sort of mark. I know it's not, the tang isn't quite that big, but you definitely don't want to sand it into the tang. So here. Might mellow that out a bit. Okay, so that's the handle pretty much shaped. All I need to do now is just round off the edges. I'm going to taper it a little bit at the bottom here because I always want a knife to be fatter at the top and narrower at the bottom, but I'll do that with sandpaper on the power sander. And same with shaping the bolster. I'll just do all that with 60 grit sandpaper. Nice fat at the back, a lot narrower at the front, so this might even come in just a little bit more when I start finishing it off. So now's when I'm going to start beveling in these two top angles. So I'll just come in at a 45-degree angle, and it's basically starting off the whole sort of rounding off process, but you always do it in bevels so you can tell that you're doing it symmetrically, because if you were to just round it off, it's very easy to do one side more than the other. Well, you sort of lose track of where everything is, so keep it all nice and angular until we're almost at the end. Right, so I'm sticking with the 120 grit, and all I'm going to do now is just cut up some nice strips, because well, the narrower the strip is, the less likely it is to break, believe it or not. Don't use your good scissors for this job. There we go, so you just get a wee strip like that. Well, for the back it doesn't matter so much because it's not concave. Anything that's concave will want to rip your sandpaper. I think we're there. Oh, that feels lovely. Cool. Get some linseed oil on that. The reason I don't go any higher grit than 120 is because this is a bushcraft knife. It's going to be used, and if you polish it too, like if you go up to like, you know, 400, 800 grit, whatever, it ends up so smooth it kind of gets slippy. Whereas if you keep it slightly rough, like with a 120 grit, it's still smooth enough, but it's also got quite a bit, you know, quite a good bit of grip to it. So that'll do. Don't know if you can read that, but boiled linseed oil, just to finish it off. Oh, in fact, almost forgot rubber gloves for this. Otherwise your hands smell like linseed oil for ages, which isn't the worst thing, but I'm about to go get my dinner, so. Dribble a bit on that. Look at that. Just makes everything so much nicer looking suddenly. What I'll tend to do is I'll do this probably once or twice a day for about a week, and that just soaks the linseed oil in really good and makes your handle just that nice dark sort of well treated look. Also get it in around the bolster. That did the job. Oh, that's so much nicer. Right. Anyway, time to stop and look at it now. I'm going to get it shiny and then I'll give you a proper look. Right, and to get a really sharp edge on this, I don't know if this is a good thing. I think it's got its risks. But see this leather pad glued here? I feel like that's the easiest way to make a power sort of leather strop, because if you get a belt, you have to join the two bits of leather somehow along that belt, whereas this, it's just one solid piece, so you don't have any sort of join or anything like that. And as long as you make sure that it's obviously spinning that way, you only ever put the blade in that way, it's never going to launch it. And if it does launch it, it's going to launch it away from you. If you choose to do this, it's your own risk. I just do it because I think it works, but it is dangerous. You can send a knife flying into your arm or something like that if you're daft about it. Anyway, enough of that. Right, so I guess it's time to test it out. So it's pretty sharp. That passes the test. And do a few feather sticks. other stick's pretty good too. So, is it still sharp? Of course it is. So, yeah. Hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe, and I'll see you for the next one. I think I'm gonna build a leather sheath for it. So I don't know if that'll be the next video, but it will be like next 2 or 3. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. And well, sorry, hit the bell. That's the one. It's complicated, this talking malarkey. But yeah. Anyway, cheers, guys.